The Magic of Halloween. A short, spooky story by Nilsen Bjørneraas, narrated by Ørjan Svingen. Episode 1. Hallowille. The village of Hallowille was blanketed in a soft, warm morning light. The streets, lined with crisp leaves and the occasional jack-o'-lantern, lay silent for now, though the energy of the day ahead seemed to hum just beneath the surface. It was the day of Halloween, after all. And for a peculiar set of friends, adventure loomed on the horizon. William was the first to step out of his house, his breath visible in the cool air as he swung his backpack over one shoulder. His house, like many others, was dressed for the occasion. Webs stretched across the porch, and pumpkins with grinning faces sat by the steps. He paused for a moment, taking in the stillness before vaulting on top of his bike, the tires crunching over the scattered leaves. Today was important, and like always, he had a plan. The destination was the Renfri's shop of Curiosities, but first he had to gather the group. As he pedaled down the street, the town began to stir. Curtains fluttered in the windows, revealing early risers beginning their day. He made his way to Lily's house first. She was already waiting on the front steps, eagerly twisting the strap of her small satchel. "William!" she called out, running towards him with a mixture of excitement and nerves. "You think today will be like last year?" William grinned. "Let's hope not." Lily hopping onto her own bike with confidence peering through her, having recalled their prior adventures. "Oh, I'm ready. Nothing will stop us. We saved Santa after all." William stared into nothingness, recalling their experiences, though almost denying the absurdity of it. "We sure did." They began to ride through the quiet streets together, their bikes making soft sounds against the cobblestones. The village was coming alive now, decorations catching in the breeze, a sense of anticipation building. Their next stop was Sam's place, who was lingering at his front door as if checking the sky for any signs of trouble. William had to call out as he skidded to a stop. "You ready, Sam?" Sam hesitated for a beat, adjusting his helmet. "As ready as I'll ever be. I still think we should have brought more flashlights." William chuckled, shaking his head. "We're not going into any cave, Sam. Yet," Sam muttered. But he joined them, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. The trio continued down the street, laughter and light banter carrying them forward. Hallowille's charm was unmistakable this time of year. Each house decked out in orange, black, and purple like the whole village was part of the holiday itself. The final stop was Natalie's house. Unlike the others, Natalie wasn't waiting eagerly by the door. She was never in a rush, always the last to get excited about anything. When they arrived, William knocked twice before the door finally creaked open, revealing Natalie leaning against the frame, her expression set in familiar boredom. Behind her stood her father, with a dark, flowing cape and sharp fangs peeking out from a grin that stretched too wide. Sean, dressed head to toe as Dracula, lingered in the doorway. "Heading out into the great unknown, are we?" Sean asked in a thick accent, spreading his cape like wings. "Beware, little ones. The world is full of terrors, and some of them are very hungry." Natalie rolled her eyes, already climbing onto her bike. "Dad, stop!" William and Sam exchanged amused glances, while Lily stifled a giggle. Sean stayed in character, bowing deeply with a flourish. Have fun, but remember, no one knows what lurks in the darkness. Natalie shot a look at the others, shaking her head as she started pedaling away. Let's go before he follows us. As the group pedaled into town, the cobbled streets echoed with the sound of their bike tires. Autumn leaves crunched beneath them, and the air was filled with the mingling scent of caramel apples and spiced cider. They passed by timber-framed houses, each more elaborately decorated than the last, with witches, ghosts, and pumpkins adorning the outside. The town buzzed with excitement. Families perused market stalls, the laughter mingling with the sound of festive music. Lanterns swayed in the breeze, casting playful shadows that danced across the cobblestones. As the group weaved through the bustling streets, they overheard playful banter between a baker and a candle maker, debating whose wares captured the spirit of Halloween best. A shop owner enthusiastically haggled with a customer over a vintage lantern, claiming it was enchanted to ward off spirits. As they neared the town hall, the mayor, dressed in an elaborate costume, cheerfully called out, "Enjoy the magic of Hallowille!" With a shared look of excitement, the group made their way towards Renfri's shop of curiosities, eager to discover what new wonders had been crafted for this year's celebration. The group rolled up to the shop, its wooden sign creaking in the breeze, detailed with cobwebs. A flickering lantern by the door cast strange shapes across the glass. Lily hopped off her bike, her eyes bright with excitement. "I bet Mr. Renfri has something amazing this year, maybe even better than last time." Natalie, already dismounting, barely glanced at her. "Yeah, because the gramophone really changed our lives." She shook her head, indifferent as ever. Lily, undeterred, grinned. "It gave us Codsworth." William, sensing their usual banter, moved towards the door with a slight chuckle. With a creak, the door opened, and the familiar jingle of the shop's bell echoed out. Inside Renfri's shop, the dim light of a dusty chandelier barely illuminated the shelves packed with strange trinkets. They left their backpacks near the entrance before approaching the counter. Mr. Renfri appeared from behind it, his heartwarming smile welcoming them. "Ah, there you are, right on time as always." "Right on time? How are you to decide when they are to come?" Mrs. Renfri said, as she passed the desk with a heavy cardboard box, filled to the brim with trinkets of the holiday. Mrs. Renfri was dressed as a mysterious fortune-teller, with a jewel-toned dress adorned with layers of beaded necklaces and a fringed shawl. Her look was finished with a jeweled headpiece and bangles that jingled as she moved, giving her an air of mystical allure. Mr. Renfri flaunted about as a Victorian vampire. His drape was long and dark, lined with crimson detailed with high-collared shirt and a bat-shaped brooch. He had a top hat and a cane, adding a touch of class to his eerie ensemble. Lily stepped forward eagerly. "What is it this year? Something even more exciting than the gramophone?" Startled the couple were by the sudden question, and before any could speak their mind, a familiar voice warmed the souls of the group. "That old thing, I hope we never see it again," Codsworth said, moving to greet them with a warm hug. "Codsworth!" they yelled in unison. Behind him stood another familiar being. It was George. He wore a brown apron dusted with flour that bore marks of a busy morning in a bakery. His broad frame filled the doorway, a comforting sight with a warm smile. A contrast to Codsworth's cream-colored shirt with the sleeves rolled up, braces holding them in place, and simple black trousers. A long white apron, much like George's, but with a few colorful patches sewn on, suggesting his hands-on approach to helping in the bakery. "Are you bakers?" Sam asked, rather confused. This wasn't how he imagined they would end up. George and Codsworth shared looks before the former answered. "Just across the street, actually." He pointed their attention towards a quaint little bakery with a wooden hinged sign saying "The Sugar Spook." Sitting just outside Renfri's shop, it had the look of an old-world pâtissière, with an ornate wooden trim and flower boxes under the windows. Though now, strings of orange lights and jack-o'-lanterns gave it a festive flair befitting the season. The momentary distraction passed just as the door to the shop jingled again. Expecting Morgana's usual grand entrance, they were surprised when a man casually walked into his shop. His movements were slow, deliberate. Though his face was partially obscured by a shadow that ought not to be present, not naturally. Almost floating across the room, with steps lighter than a feather, the man approached the counter with oddity in hand. Mrs. Renfri glanced up, her smile never faltering. "Can I help you with something?" The oddity was revealed to be an ancient-looking amulet hanging by a black chain. Its surface was cracked in several places, the tarnished metal seemingly unable to contain a faint glow that pulsed within. Faint traces of an intricate insignia could be seen, something that might once have been a regal crest. "This needs tinkering," he said, his voice eerily confident. The group oogled him from the sidelines. His hair was dark brown and curly, no longer than his ears. He had a scruffy beard, also dark brown, and eyes that were piercingly blue as the deepest ocean. Mrs. Renfri stepped in, her expression curious. "An interesting piece. Old, certainly. Where did you come upon such a treasure?" The couple continued to examine it with care, turning it over in both confusion and excitement. "Very old," Mr. Renfri mumbled. The figure's response was vague. "An old family heirloom." His tone carried an air of mystery, as if more was hidden behind the words than he let on. Intrigued, Mrs. Renfri spoke sharply. "If you want it fixed, it might take some time." "I need it fixed now," he commanded. The tension in the room seemed to thicken, the air itself almost crackling. The group exchanged uneasy glances. "This is no ordinary trinket," Mr. Renfri put, his voice low and steady. "An artifact of such value in ancient history cannot be hastily repaired. It requires patience, precision, and great care. We must proceed cautiously or risk further damage." "The amulet is more important than you know," he replied, his voice a low growl. Having noticed his change in demeanor, he swiftly changed back to his more approachable tone. "I don't have time for idle discussion. Can you do it now?" Lily, ever the curious, couldn't help but chime in. "What's your name?" Though the question was harmless, he did not enjoy being put on a pedestal like that. "I have many names," he said, a faint grin covering his face. As he finished his sentence, he turned back to the shopkeepers and leaned in. His voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper that seemed to echo in the room. "Time is not a luxury I can afford," he said, each word deliberate, almost like a command. "This amulet is not just an heirloom, it's a key. It unlocks far more than you can imagine." The Renfris exchanged glances, their expression unreadable. Whatever was happening in the Renfri shop of curiosities had just become very complicated. Sam, listening in intently, asked, "A key to what?" Before being granted an answer, the attention shifted towards Mr. Renfri, who took hold of the amulet. His face bore a strange recognition to it before leaning down to grab a tool behind the counter. "What are you doing?" the man asked, rather frightened. Mr. Renfri rose with a hammer in hand, laid the amulet flat on the desk and ready to swing. "There, stop!" Mrs. Renfri cried, but it was too late. Mr. Renfri smacked the amulet with great force, shattering its glass into 1,000 pieces. The youngsters jumped back in shock. The room gasped, but none dare speak a word because of what they witnessed afterwards.